Welcome back, and we're here with episode 4. Again, I'm Torri, and we have
Jeff.
And so we're so excited for another episode that we're able to give you. We're doing another late night, and this time around, what are we going to be talking about, babe?
Today we're going to be talking about, is college necessary for success?
And so Jeff and I, as many of our listeners who are friends know, we met in college, and
Rutgers.
Some of our very best friends we met in college. And so, of course, there's so many other benefits of being able to pursue, that higher education. But we really want to talk about today, kind of challenging, is it necessary to be, quote, successful in life?
Yeah, and then we're not saying we're for or against it. We're just here to kind of share our experiences and kind of what we went through and what our thoughts are about this topic.
Yeah, especially because I feel like when we were growing up, and I hate that we're at an age where saying when we were growing up actually is like more than 10 years ago, but
we're grown up now.
What was that, 2008 is when we graduated high school or started?
Well, and then 2011 is when we graduated college. Yeah. 2012 for you.
So, 10 plus years ago, there really wasn't as much alternative that was provided outside of going to college, other than like the military or something, right?
Yeah, pretty much. There wasn't any college seemed like that was the only option. Now, from what I remember.
And there was no, unless you go into the military or let's say had a family business, it just seemed like college was the only step after high school in order for you to even be considered, again, successful. But now it's like, I feel like there's so many different definitions of what success actually is in comparison to what it may have been when we were younger, and then even in our parents' generation.
And I think social media kind of furthered that image. I remember when we were in college, Facebook was the most popular social platform. Facebook was it, and now we've got a whole bunch of other ones, and things have kind of changed, and people are more aware and know about different options.
Exactly. Whether it's like, we had career fairs, but now it's like people of different professions have their Instagram pages, and that's where like so many kids learn about different types of jobs outside of, teacher, lawyer, doctor, etc. And then it's also the social media is providing different professions that weren't even a thing with us growing up.
Yeah, a lot has changed. It's only been 12 years, but a lot has changed since then.
Including the cost of education as well.
Oof, let's not talk about that.
Yeah, so that's something that definitely has been an obstacle for a long time for a lot of people. But I think even now, college has become college has been more unattainable than ever for certain groups, right? So certain, whether it's your income or social class, what have you, college has just become so out of reach for people simply because of inflation, tuition hikes, and
access,
so that's definitely
no transportation. There's a whole bunch of reasons why.
People used to take multiple types of transportation to get to college, and I remember people used to take a train, a bus, and because they were commuting from home. And to me, I was so naive. I'm like, oh, you don't just live on campus? You don't just drive, because I was so unaware of the obstacles that people basically had to go through in order to be able to go to college. But the question actually is, do you learn what you need in college in order to move forward in life? Or is it something that's just done because society tells us that's what the next step is?
Well, I guess that's what we're talking about today, isn't it?
Yeah. So today's goal in this episode is really to just challenge your viewpoint of college. Was it something, or is it something that is considered a stepping stone of success or a milestone of success simply because society tells us it is? Of course, there are certain professions where you need higher education, but is it the only route to achieve success.
Spoiler alert, it's not.
Before we go into it,
so this episode of Instructions Not Included is proudly sponsored by the most reliable real estate team, the Rise Group, led by Jeff and Torri. After doing business throughout New Jersey, our team spread its roots to the Sunshine State to help sellers and buyers reach their real estate goals. We want our clients to feel confident, educated, and at ease every step of the way. Whether you're a first-time buyer or a seasoned investor, we've got you covered. Send us a DM on Instagram at Jeff and Torri, or visit therisegroup.re.com to schedule a free consultation today.
As we mentioned in prior episodes, while Jeff and I have had similar upbringings, we've also had very different upbringings as well. Again, we both met in college, but the route to get to college was very different for both of us. For me, it was no question that after high school, I had to just go to college. Everything was, don't have a boyfriend because you need to finish college. I even joke about this, but this is a true story. I wasn't allowed to go snowboarding because my mom was always so concerned that I would get so injured that I couldn't finish college. So to me, it was ingrained at a very early age that whatever happens, finishing college is the number one priority.
Yep. And then I came from the perspective of divorced household. So there were things that were going on that I guess I didn't have the attention that you did. And I had more freedom of choice and was able to kind of go to college based on what more of societal pressure, I'd say. So where your perspective was your mom and your possibly your dad and your family, I was more going to college based on what society was telling me was the right thing to do.
Mm-hmm. And definitely for me, I knew, we touched base on this in the last episode 3, that my parents came here and were only able to come here because my mom was a nurse. And so she was able to bring us over. And just as I guess, fact, if you will, the migration of nurses from the Philippines to America is called the brainwave, because while a lot of other countries provide goods in the sense of different food or things like oil, the Philippines is the number one exporter of nurses.
So everybody listening, if you have a Filipino friend, guarantee 2 or 3 family members are nurses.
Yeah. And so my mom was part of that, essentially brainwave. And but that's, I digress. Otherwise, so I knew from a very young age that your education is your doorway to opportunity and a better life in the future.
Yep.
And I still remember, though, that I didn't necessarily want to become a nurse just because my mom is a nurse, my dad's retired, but regardless, they were both nurses. I would hear their conversations every morning, and it was just something that I was like, I cannot do this. But I'm sure a lot of people in my shoes too likely felt the pressure to be a nurse, or because that's the only thing they were exposed to, it's really kind of ingrained in their head of oh, well, I'm going to pursue nursing too.
Yeah.
So even though college was the end goal, there was really no conversation as to what I was actually doing in college.
Just go to college so you're going to be a nurse.
I don't even know if that was assumed, honestly. My mom to this day says, I never told you to be a nurse. So I don't know if either she just doesn't remember or it was just my own pressure just because of what I was exposed to.
Yeah, I know from my perspective, we had a lot of friends and family members who were nursing. A lot of my family members were blue-collar jobs, which is out of the norm, I'd say. But I really didn't have that pressure, but I knew it was there for a lot of Filipinos.
Yeah. And so how did you, because you had mentioned that you pursued business simply because your friends were going through it, right?
I was very unambitious when I was younger. I just followed the crowd. I remember one of my friends went to Rutgers, so I was like, I'll go to Rutgers. And they were going to study business, so I was like, let me try to apply for business. The long story short, I didn't end up getting in, so I just ended up doing economics, which was the closest thing to business. So I really didn't pick my major. I just followed the crowd and just stuck with it. And that's how I kind of got started in college.
So it sounds like for you, because of the lack of direction, like you said, you kind of followed the crowd. And for me, again, I don't even remember any conversations as to like, what are you actually going to be doing after college? But for me, I knew I had to do some sort of science. Like, I didn't really know anything outside of science. And I was super obsessed with CSI at that age. CSI, Law and Order, like,
I get it.
you know? And so I was like, oh, I want to do forensic science. And this was a thing where it was like, I didn't even look up what the pay would be. I didn't look up, are there any job opportunities around me? Or like, would I have to move? Do I need higher education?
At least you had some kind of thought. I just remember like when we were signing up for majors, I was like, I don't know, how am I supposed to know now? And then I remember Googling like, you don't really pick a major till your sophomore year. So I was like, oh, whatever, I'll put this and then I could change it later.
Yeah. And for me, it was more like forensic science wasn't available in every like university. And so I ended up going to Rutgers also, obviously. But the only reason I went there, right, was because an ex-boyfriend, I was like, oh, well, I have to stay in New Jersey. So rather than being like, okay, I need to choose a major that is interesting to me, I was like, oh, biochemistry sounds like the closest thing to forensic science.
Sounds so much fun.
And it was not. And it was the most difficult thing ever. So for me, it was like I felt the pressure to just complete my education, right? Or like, regardless if I liked the major or not, regardless if I knew what I was going to do, because it wasn't until college that I realized, oh, research is not for me. Like, I don't like experimenting. I don't like writing thesis. I don't like writing as in scientific form. And all I knew was I had to finish, or else like changing majors wasn't even a question for me.
Yeah, I mean, I was kind of the same way. I just like, society tells you if you have a college degree, you'll be successful. And I was like, okay, let me just get a college degree. And I just didn't really like think about what my career path would be. And then everything kind of just fell into place. And I kind of got my internship because that was the only one that accepted me. So it's just crazy how things just luckily work out for me. But I really just didn't have any thought to how college would like change my career path or put me on my path post college, like adult life.
What about like, did you have any career fairs?
Yeah, we had career fairs, but I just remember like nothing really appealed to me. Like I got a job when I was 16, so all I wanted to do was make money. And then at the career fair, nothing really like spoke to me like, oh, this is the career path I want. So it just wasn't a thought until I surrounded myself around my business fraternity and around people who are just in business field. So I was like, okay, all of these people are successful. Again, societal pressures. This is what I probably need to do.
So let's define like, what was your definition of success back then versus what it is now?
So back then, success was high-paying job, big name company that everybody recognizes, Fortune 500 in the corporate world. Yeah, I mean, like a very solid reputation of a company that you work for, and you're making a significant amount of money compared to your peers. That was success to me.
Yeah, and it's like now we know that, and it seems kind of so far, I guess, for like the regular person, that now there's so many opportunities that are either available or could just be created, in which college wasn't necessary in order for that person to be considered successful.
Yeah, and that's just crazy because back then, if you had a job that didn't have a college degree, you were looked down upon. Whereas today, no, I mean, you've cheated the system. You found a way to
without having to go into so much debt too.
Without having to go into so much debt. And it's just crazy how the tables have turned over, I guess, the 13-year period that we've been in college and now have graduated. Well, graduated college and now we're here as adults.
And also I think there's just such this like myth or like this false notion that just because you go to college you're an intellectual or that you're an intelligent person. Yeah, because I feel like there were so many kids, again, like going to college is such an important, or was such an important aspect of both of our lives growing up, because you're exposed to so many different people and different
education isn't the only
personalities.
thing you got from college. There was so much more.
But that's really when I learned that there were like rich kids that were just there just because they had to, not because they were even thinking that they needed a job after. It was like, oh, well, I'm just going to take over like my dad so and so. So I'm just here because they told me I needed it, you know? Just because you graduate from college or just because you're able to get into college, it's not, or it shouldn't be a marker of someone's intelligence or even their worth.
Yeah, absolutely.
But back then, I feel like it definitely was it was definitely a marker. Again, like you said, like you were looked down on, and now, you know, there's so many people that unfortunately, you know, I'm one of them that are, you know, have a lot of student loans still. And luckily I was able to do something with that. But there's so many people that have student loan debt and aren't even doing anything that is related to their major.
Or they probably couldn't get a job in their field. And that's just one of the other conversations that can be had about the school system, the cost of it, and just like, is that opportunity cost worth it? And I think the younger generation now is
just so much more well informed.
They see it. The facade of college is the only route is like disappearing. And now, like to your point, people are trying to use social media to have careers and just finding different avenues that weren't available to our generation back in 2010s.
And I think also the one thing is, you know, for the generation before us, college, regardless of how hard it was, and again, tuition was not as high, but regardless of how hard it was, there was no complaint about it, you know, because that was going to be the best thing you can do. Now I feel like our generation is essentially trying to ensure that the future, the youth, are more informed about their decisions as far as like, make sure you're actually interested in what you are going to spend the next 4 years of your life doing.
So what would your major have been if you knew what you knew now?
I think I still definitely would stay within the science realm, but the only class that I truly remember and liked genuinely, like I was actually excited to go to class, was my abnormal psychology class. And I think a reason why I didn't even want to pursue or like even investigate that like subject any further was because so many people were psych majors, and there was such a stigma against like psych and communication majors, and no one was going to do anything.
Sociology too.
But it's like at the end of the day, I look back on it and I was like, why did I just not investigate my interest in, you know, different mental health conditions, you know, concepts like Freud and all that stuff. And it was because in my head, I'm like, I don't want to be a psych major. I don't know what I'm going to do with it. But at the end of the day, I had no idea what I was going to do with my biochem major either. But it was just the fear that like, oh, I can't back out of this. I can't add another year before graduating, you know?
For me, I think the only class I really enjoyed was personal finance, just because I was only motivated by money back then. Money was like really my only motivation. So all my classes that I took, it's like, I think everybody can relate to this. You just like memorize the information, you put it on paper, and then you never hear from it again. And I just went through that process all 4 years, and got good grades. I graduated, and it's just, I feel like I learned more from being in the field, being in the workforce, and being a part of businesses and corporate America, and like seeing how a real industry or business works. But everything that I learned in college, if you told me to remember it, I don't. But personal finance, that class, that's the only one I really kind of took what I learned there and applied it to my everyday life.
Yeah. And at the end of the day, without the experiences in college, you may not have been prepared to receive or to like perceive, I should say, the lessons that you learned outside. Does that make sense? Like
Yeah.
You can't, I feel like although the education in college wasn't necessarily complete, if you will, right? Like I feel like I just still wasn't ready for the world after I graduated. Without those 4 years, I really wouldn't have been ready for the world.
Yeah, because going back to my point of like, college isn't just for book education. You learned how, like social education, you learned how to communicate with a lot. Like Rutgers was a huge campus with a ton of people from different backgrounds, different diversities, ethnicities, you name it. And we learned how to have friends from different cultures.
Yeah, for me, I just don't know how independent or how responsible I would be if I stayed at home.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
It's a whole different experience. Commuting versus like living on campus, in my opinion, I think it's a different experience.
or just not going at all,
Or
going
just
away.
not going at all, yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, everybody has different perspectives on it, but from like I lived on campus, and then I went off campus and I had an apartment, and it's just having that experience at that age was just a great stepping stone into adulthood to see what that was like.
And yeah, and again, like our very best friends, we both met our best friends in college.
Yeah, I mean,
And there's always just that common like history together that like nothing can change, right? Like again, if I didn't go to college, I would have never met Nina, and then she would have never introduced me to you.
Yep.
And so sometimes it's like being open. I think even though neither of us knew what we were going to be doing, somehow there was like a serendipitous reason, right? That like we both were at the same place at the same time. And then, you know, however many years later, here we are doing a podcast, and and back then we just never even spoke to each other. It was just
we weren't even friends.
Yeah.
I would say we were barely acquaintances.
We just happened to run in the same circle. So it's like, and I feel like there's a lot of stories I hear now of people reconnecting or reuniting like years and relationships later and realizing like, oh, my best friend in high school, why was I never just, you know, dating that person?
Yeah, college. I mean, 13 years now, it's just like some of the people that I met in college. We have 13-year-long friendships, and it's just some people that will be in our lives forever at this point. So it's just, yes, college isn't necessarily necessary for success from a work standpoint, but I mean, from a social standpoint, I think it really helped develop me, at least as a person, as a friend, as a human being.
Just because you didn't go to college or you didn't pursue education as soon as you finished high school, it didn't mean that you wouldn't be able to do it in the future or that you were limited to whatever job you were pursuing at that time.
Yeah, time was another pressure. Right. Like if you weren't 21, 22 and graduated college, you're behind.
Yeah, and you know, at the end of the day, I feel like a lot of people are so naive to how life is dealt sometimes for some people. Yeah. You know, like some people may not be able to afford going to school, even though they may be the valedictorian or the most, you know, one of the a super educated, super intelligent person. You know, health could be, I remember someone that was in our circle had to pause med school because he got super sick, and he ended up finishing early, I think, but he ended up starting late. So it's like health, you know, there's so many different factors that some people should not be looked down on because they either did not pursue that path or maybe pursue that path at a later time simply because of how life, again, fell in their hands.
Yeah, there's so many different reasons why people don't finish college, go to college, or even apply or whatnot. There's just, people need to be more understanding of everyone's different situation, and I'm happy to say that I think that it's not the same environment that it was when we were younger.
If there's one thing that I would tell someone who is like in high school or, you know, soon to be junior and looking into college, I definitely would have them reconsider, you know, what are your actual interests? some people may pursue a major because it's what's in their family. So it's what's expected of them. It's what's going to make money, or it's what's going to, I don't know, make everyone else happy except them. Right. So I remember when I was going to career fairs when I was in Houston for genetic counseling, everyone would always ask me, or even my students who I would rotate with me, they're always like, what advice would you give me? And I would say, don't rush going into a field or going into even a master's after college, or in this case, going right into college after high school, unless you're certain that this is something that you really want to commit to.
Yeah.
Right? Because there's so many people that end up leaving because they realize, I can't do this 24/7. What's the point of spending all of this money and I'm not even going to finish what I do?
Yeah, and I think my biggest takeaway would just be to just really take your time, really understand, because there's so much pressure to kind of figure out your major, figure out what you like, and you may not know what you like right when you're going to college. So it's just take everything in and just give your best effort to everything that you do, and eventually things will work out. I think for me, I got into entrepreneurship, but that wasn't my plan.
Yeah, because for genetic counseling, I didn't even know what that was until I had graduated college and I needed a job. I decided, okay, let me work at the pharmacy at my, parents' hospital, but I knew that wasn't forever. I was like, okay, let me apply for research positions at, like you said, at these big name research centers. But it was was that really something I had wanted to do? And then it wasn't until I just got a phone call, and it was my research, my PI, I forget. My PI was like, my brother's company needs an assistant. Do you want to do it? And I was just like, no, I don't want to be an assistant. I don't even know what that is. And my dad was just like, just take it. And so I had no idea that I was going to work for, back then it was Reaper Genetics, the biggest pre-implantation genetic company at the time. And then by just saying yes to that opportunity, I was exposed to the genetic counselors in that office. And that's when I said, I wonder what they actually do. Because at that point I was an assistant, and then I was a tech. So I was doing the testing on the embryos.
Yeah.
But again, like you said, staying curious allowed me to be like, okay, what are those people doing in the office and how do we differ? And by asking those questions is when I realized, oh, I actually want to do that. So again, being open and sometimes just saying yes to certain opportunities rather than feeling forced that you have to choose something right away may actually be a better way to achieve your definition of success because you are doing it at your own pace.
Yeah, and at the same time too, another big piece of advice I'd say is just don't get stuck. At that age, you're so young, you have your life ahead of you. If you're about to graduate and you really don't like your career, maybe you should stay another year, change your major. Maybe you should just try to find another option. But at the end of the day, experience is what kind of moves you forward. There, in every career, in every industry, there's a thing called transferable skills, which was one of the best pieces of advice I got when I was a waiter and busboy in college. That was my job. That they told me yeah, being a waiter, you have communication skills, you have customer service skills, you have numbers, sales, math skills. And then I applied that to my internship, and then I applied that to my day job. So just remember to keep learning and remember to being flexible and knowing that you do have a lot of time ahead of you, especially when you're at that age in college.
And I think that advice is still applicable to people now, regardless of what your age is, especially for people that I guess you could say are feeling stuck at their job now or may need to change jobs because there's been, all the layoffs that have happened, or just the need to, again, increase or change careers simply because your needs are just not being met anymore, or your bills aren't even being paid anymore because of that job.
Yeah,
right?
especially nowadays, most people need kind of two incomes to survive, or they need both parents or both members of the household working. It's just like the one salary kind of household is a little more difficult in today's world. So it's important that like you have to like the job that you're doing. If you don't like the job that you're doing, you're going to go down a path where you're going to resent yourself for like keeping you in this position. So it's never too late to change, and it's always important to just focus on what you like, what you do, and just giving your best effort at it.
But just to kind of take it at a more, I guess you could say like more of a realistic aspect too, that sometimes when a layoff happens, right, or you end up getting, you end up being fired from a job, what have you, sometimes in those moments, that's when there's a pivot that happens or an opportunity to pivot, and you just have to take it, you
Yeah, I
know?
know. And like coming from an entrepreneurship perspective, there are so many stories I've heard of people getting laid off, and that's what triggered them to start their business. So you never know what opportunities may hold. It may look like a bad scenario in front of you, but it's how you apply what you've learned, adapt, and just keep trying to push forward.
Which is a lesson that, or which are lessons that we want to be an example for Easton, right? So like
Yeah.
another reason why this topic came about is because Jeff and I have already talked about what Easton's future could be like and how we would support him in any decision he would make, right? But in regards to education, to me, I would want him to pursue college again, just to be able to experience life at that age in its full capacity. And, you know, at that point, if he doesn't want to go to college, we'd have to find an alternative to that.
Mm-hmm.
And then he'd also just have to have a plan as to what are you actually going to be doing.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly it. Like, we want to like, we experienced college and we know the benefits of what college gave us. So we want to put him on that path. But we understand how today's lay of the land is when it comes to careers. And if he has an interest in something that he wants to pursue that's outside of college, we'd be open to that as long as he has a plan, an idea of how that's going to be successful for him. Like for us, it was important that we started a college fund for him. Not that we are going to force him to go to college, but just to have that money is set aside just in case he does go, and we are prepared to pay for it, which is very expensive. Most parents today have what's called a 529 savings plan. So for those of you who don't know, this is a savings plan that allows you to have tax-free growth for the use of college payments, education payments, but it can only be used for that. So investing into this fund, you're essentially like stuck in the sense that if your kid doesn't go to college, you can't use this money. So it was important for us to not go that route and put it in a fund where we can give it to him if he decides to pursue another route, which is, let's say, what trade school, if he wants to start his own business or whatever venture that he may have in front of him that's outside of college, because we know that college isn't necessary for success. It's something that was dangled in front of us. That was the carrot that you had to go for. But now there's so many opportunities and so many routes that you can go that we would be doing a disservice if we forced him to go just because everybody else was going.
The one advice that you and I got that was something we definitely want to share is we were on our baby moon and we were just in Palm Beach, and we had a great conversation with our Uber driver, who of course saw that I was like 40 weeks pregnant at that point, or whatever. I was huge. And the advice he gave us was whatever passion or whatever interest you see in your child, like, go for it, because that was his advice of being a good parent, just allowing your child to have the space to pursue, whether it's music, dance, science, like, I don't know, hopefully not a gamer, but, like something of that sort.
Hopefully not a gamer. You can't hate on gaming. Gaming makes so much money nowadays, and it's hand-eye coordination. My point is, in the Uber driver example, the Uber driver was a musician, and he noticed that his son could carry a tune. They had rhythm, they could sing, and luckily enough, that was something that the father had experience in that he could push him to, and that's what he did. I'm not coming from an entrepreneurship perspective, I'm not going to push him to be an entrepreneur. I'm sure you wouldn't push him to be a genetic counselor.
I don't think he was pushing. He gave him the tools.
We're going to see what he is skilled at, and we are going to try to hone those skills for him so that he can make a decision on what he wants to do.
We want him, we just have again, our definition of success is a lot different, and we want to take that level of, again, the generational wealth beyond a high income.
And take away the societal pressures, and familial pressures that we had in our life.
So at the end of the day, we actually think college isn't necessary.
There's so many options now. It's so crazy how there's so many ways to make money. There's so many ways to get fulfillment. And when you combine the two, that's when it's magic.
Tom Bilyeu states, passion, is it excavated? So do you dig for it, or is it created? Right? So are you an artist? So it's like, that's really what it is. I think our job is to just be able to expose him to so many different avenues that he understands what that passion is, or he understands his interest at an early age, and he's not forced, or he's not following the crowd. And although that worked for us, we want to provide something of a different perspective as well. Like, I wish I had more hobbies.
Yeah, I will admit though, if he was like, Dad, I want to be like you, I want to be an entrepreneur, I want to be a business owner, my heart would melt, and I would give him all the tools and education that I've ever learned.
So with that, we're going to wrap it up. And again, at the end of the day, success is really what you define it. And sometimes life doesn't fall the way that we've planned, and rather than feeling like you have to pursue something or you have to go a specific way because everybody else is doing it, it's really just a matter of how you pick yourself up, whether it takes you 1 year, 5 years, or more. That's really what I think provides value in a person, not necessarily what college they went to, not what their job is, but to me, a successful person also has to go beyond money and material things.
Yeah.
Right? Your education, your intelligence, and your intelligence goes beyond a college degree.
And your title. A janitor could be just as successful as a CEO as long as they're, in my mind, success is living a fulfilled life and being able to provide for your family and doing things that make you happy in between.
With dignity.
I'm sorry?
With dignity.
With dignity.
Yeah. So with that, follow, subscribe, give us a great rating, review, and share.
Tell your friends.
Yeah.
Check us out on YouTube.
And until the next episode,
let's continue to design
our extraordinary lives
together.